So, what do you think?
It's a lot to take in, kid. Where do I even start?
You can start right here at the beginning. The first time Uncharted 4: A Thief's End was shown to the public. This infamous trailer underwent a remarkable amount of scrutiny to determine just how feasible it really was. But now we finally have the answer. And as you may have guessed, this is John with one more Uncharted 4 video for you. This time we're going to take a look back at previous trailers and gameplay videos to see how the final game stacks up, just as we did with Quantum Break last month. But this first trailer, it's not actually in the game at all, but there is a similar looking scene. Now the sand deformation is gone, image quality is stepped back, and the frame rate is not 60 frames per second, but it's safe to say that it still managed to look very nice in the end. Now it's also probably safe to say that the original teaser was pre-rendered, or at least based on the work Naughty Dog was doing on the engine at the time. There are definitely comparable elements here, and it's neat to see just how close the team has come in many ways, but it's not quite there. But the next time Uncharted 4 would be shown was 6 months later at the PlayStation Experience in 2014. Now at this point there was still speculation as to whether Naughty Dog would be aiming for 60 frames per second or just go with 30. This demo was locked at 30 FPS, but there still wasn't a solid answer yet. Of course now we know how it all turned out, but it's interesting to see the ways in which the visuals have changed since this bit of footage. Early on you'll see changes to the particle effects used for water, as well as the addition of volumetric light shafts streaming down into the cave. Nate also turned his flashlight on earlier in this demo. There's also a noticeable difference in terms of lighting and colorization. The final game has a warmer, earthier tone, while the demo is more bluish. The water in this next area is also interesting, as it's more translucent in the final game, while in this original demo, the flashlight beam actually produces visible light along the water's surface. Which do you guys prefer? Also, the way the light plays off the cave ceiling makes the world geometry appear slightly chunkier in the final game. As you emerge though, there is visible eye adaptation in the final that doesn't really show up in the demo. Now as we start moving through this area then, it does appear that asset placement and quality has been improved, with the resulting map looking more refined in its final iteration. Ambient shadow quality has also changed, with more diffused looking shadows in the final game, as opposed to the sharper looking shadows in the demo. As we come up on the top here, you'll notice that the demo has a glossier appearance, almost as if the sunlight were playing off of wet foliage. This look still exists in the final game in other parts, but in this particular area, things do appear different. Primarily, this area has a deeper, richer green hue in the final game. Then as we climb up here, note the addition of flying insects that were absent in the demo. Oh, and of course these big rocks too. Stepping out here on this cliffside shows us a nice distant view of the environment. While it mostly looks the same at a glance, you can actually see that some of the background geometry has been reworked. The demo also features thicker clouds across the environment. And as Nate makes a jump here, we also see that motion blur has been added and improved, something we'll see more of later. The difference in color really stands out in this particular section, but I think it looks quite good in both iterations. So the rest of this open area actually manages to look very similar throughout, with minor changes to map details, modified lighting, and improved effects work. But we actually tried to duplicate the demo in terms of gameplay and discovered that it wasn't really possible. Enemies have been placed differently in the final game and in larger numbers, making the encounters and situations from the demo impossible to replicate. This isn't all surprising though, as that ties right into the core design of the game. We can at least say that the AI in the final game is as interesting to fight, if not more so, than what you see in this demo. Naughty Dog certainly delivered on that front. Moving into the last area of the demo then, we do actually see some additional changes. While this first scene actually looks very similar, apart from the change in lighting, we do have some climbing up ahead, and it's here that we see some changes. But before we get there, you can at least appreciate the detailed jungle foliage on display here. These rocks actually look noticeably less detailed in the final game. At the top then, we finally get to another cutscene where we can see a perfect one-to-one comparison. We see motion blur added here and shadows cast in the dust. But the main improvement comes from improved character shading. Both of the brothers look more realistic here in the final game, and the lighting seems to play more naturally off their skin, especially in this shot. And now we come to the end of the 2014 demo. The next time Uncharted 4 would be shown is actually at E3 2015. We have the full demo here and once again have attempted to recreate parts of it. Right away we see improved character shading again along with brighter colors all around. You can really see it in Nate's complexion. The sun position has also changed from the demo and Sully now has a big sweat spot on his back. So as we push forward from here, once again the difference in lighting is evident. Some of this is likely due to the change in time of day, but it does seem that the lighting has been improved overall. Now, we tried to replicate the action here, but just as before, the AI doesn't always play nicely, and we couldn't replicate every action. The exploding grenade here, for instance, that was probably just a one-off chance, and we didn't run into it. But all of the same cool physics and destructible goodies work just as we saw in E3, which is pretty awesome. This is a sizable area with a lot of breakables, and it's possible to take out enemies in a variety of different ways. I tried to follow the demo here, but that's certainly not the only way to play. Also in the original demo there is this guy here, right after the sandbags, it breaks through the stand. For some reason he never seems to show up in the final game in that exact position, so I was not able to replicate it. I actually tested out the auto aim feature here initially just to see if it would help match the demo footage, but it didn't really help, so I ended up turning it off. This whole thing at the top of the stairs too, it never really happened to me like this, but I have seen similar things at other points in the game, so it doesn't necessarily seem impossible. But it's really the Jeep ride we're waiting for, and that's where we're heading next. Knowing that this game was demoed in front of a live audience is pretty impressive to me after making this video, as it's not an especially easy Jeep to control. This thing just loves to fishtail, and it's fun to drive, but that doesn't make it easy. There does actually appear to be a slight change in the speed of the Jeep though, as even at full throttle I had a tough time keeping pace with the demo. Still, this sequence plays out exactly as we had hoped in the final game, and is even more complex than I had originally imagined. While trying to match the original demo, I discovered that there are lots of alternative routes through this area, and the dialogue is crafted around this. So if you go down one alley, you'll hear a specific quip from Sully, but if you go down another, he might say something else entirely. Visually, the biggest change here, aside from the lighting, stems from the improved motion blur. It's more comprehensive all around compared to the demo with fewer visible artifacts. And yes, I know, there will be people in the comments telling me how terrible motion blur is, but again, what can I say, I love me some good motion blur. Then we ramp off the stairs 50 Cent style and land in the grass. This scene demonstrates the massive improvements to motion blur that we see in the final game. This construction site also really highlights the difference in color and lighting from the E3 demo. The final game has a richer, more sun-baked appearance in comparison. Eventually, the armored vehicle catches up with us again, and it's time for some crazy driving off here to the right. This section was actually rather difficult to duplicate, as the edges of the building can throw the Jeep off just a hair. The cars at the bottom here do actually deform nicely when you land on them though. Then we have a nice short cutscene here, and once again, the primary visible differences are motion blur and lighting. Moving on, we see some modifications to the water reflections here as well. Then we get a taste of Terminator 2 as we drop off into this drainage ditch. Unfortunately, I had to cut here as I missed the cement pipe at the end. Seriously, live demoing this game would have been very stressful. But let's continue then. Now as we come to this next section, we also note that the vehicle you latch onto moves slower in the final game. So even if we attach to the vehicle at exactly the same point as the demo still manages to pull ahead, forcing a resync of the video. As we're pulled along here, you can also see that the water rendering differs between the two versions once again, as Nate skips along its surface. Once in the thick of it though, it continues to look very similar, but with richer overall lighting and, once again, improved motion blur. The section is also longer than it was in the demo. It doesn't seem possible to catch Sam in the first Jeep you acquire. I had to bail and hunt down another one in order to avoid getting blown up. Once the two do meet up, however, we have a cutscene to enjoy once again, and here it basically looks identical, save for the change in lighting. For a scene demonstrated almost a year ago, it certainly seemed really polished at this point. As the two argue here though, a truck comes out of nowhere and slams into Nate's Jeep. Once trapped beneath the Jeep, look closely at the mud and dirt on Nate's character model. The procedural decal system is at work here with a differing amount of visible filth plastered all over his clothes and skin. This highlights one of the benefits of using real-time cinematics. Characters can appear differently depending on player actions. The beautiful fire effects here actually look very much the same, but they do seem to spread further in the final game. Then Nate grabs his gun in preparation for the enemies just outside. As the door flies open, the difference in color becomes evident once more, though Nate does take more damage on the demo side, which only further desaturates the image. Then we have the awesome truck escape sequence, which also pretty much looks the same. Still amazing to behold though, and it runs very nicely. This whole section is scripted, but it still looks absolutely amazing. Some of the physics on display here appear predefined, but others do actually react differently between the two versions, suggesting that dynamic physics are in play. Still, the rest of the scene plays out pretty much exactly the same between the two versions, showing that it was in a great place just about a year ago. But as that scene draws to a close, we come to the end of the demo, which brings us here. We always enjoy looking back on older versions of games just to get an idea of how the final compares, and in the case of Uncharted 4, even back in 2014, it's pretty clear that the team was on a set path and was simply focused on executing that vision. The visuals have changed in a number of ways, but it's still very much the same game. The only pre-release footage that really outshines the final game remains that initial 60 FPS teaser trailer, but they actually managed to get surprisingly close, so we can forgive it. Anyways, that's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe, and until next time, this is John signing off.